Hello, friends. It is a joy to be able to share some reflections with you on this day where we are commemorating the life of HPB. And I wanted to share some thoughts about what we can call a transcendental aspect of Theosophy. Normally, we think of Theosophy as this collection of teachings which describe the universe and human beings from a spiritual perspective, from a psychic aspect, as well as the physical one. But Blavatsky said in several of her writings that there are more transcendental aspects to what Theosophy is. For example, she wrote, "The beacon light of truth can be reached only when the adept has become absolute master of his personal self, able to control all his physical and psychic senses by the aid of his seventh sense, through which he is gifted also with the true wisdom of the gods, or Theosophy." So you see here she's talking about Theosophy using the Greek term Theosophia, as the true wisdom of the gods, or divine wisdom as we translate it often. This aspect of Theosophy is a wisdom that implies the perception of truth, and it can be reached only, as she says, when the adept, when the enlightened being is able to open the seventh sense, or to operate with the seventh sense, which is a spiritual sense. So here she's talking about this transcendental aspect of Theosophy. Theosophy not as a series of teachings, but as a wisdom in which the person can perceive truth directly, rather than by means of somebody else teaching those perceptions. So there are two theosophies. She says in another article, there is Theosophy and Theosophy. The true Theosophy of the Theosophist and the Theosophy of a fellow of the society of that name. So she makes a difference between a member or fellow of the Theosophical Society and a Theosophist. If we take the meaning of Theosophy as divine wisdom, a Theosophist is one who is in touch with that divine wisdom. And the Theosophy of that person is one that comes, as I said, from the direct perception of truth. And then there is the Theosophy of the members of the Theosophical Society, which is the Theosophy written down by those who could perceive directly truth. So in this view, we are all members or fellows of the Theosophical Society who aspire to become a Theosophist. And we use the teachings that true Theosophists, that is, those who were in touch with the divine wisdom, the teachings that they write down for us, so that by working with these teachings, we can gradually approach the real Theosophy. So the goal of a member of the society who aspires to become a real Theosophist is to work in that direction, so that eventually we can perceive Theosophy in a direct way, so that we can have be in touch with this divine wisdom. So she continues, and she says the true Theosophists in the society are not numerous, complete altruism being a rara avis, which means a rare feature, even among modern Theosophists. The other members are free to occupy themselves with whatever they like. And before she was talking about that members are free to study different traditions, etc. But what she's saying here is that the real Theosophist, the true Theosophist, is one in which we can see complete altruism. And this is the key for how she would recommend that we need to work in order to eventually become a true Theosophist. She says, the union of the divine spark, which animates man with the parent flame, which is the divine all, this union is the ultimate thule, which means the highest attainment, of those theosophists who devote themselves entirely to the service of humanity. So you see here she's connecting the true theosophist with altruism, with service of humanity. And the aim of this theosophist is the union of the divine spark with the divine all. And after saying this, she says, this is true theosophy, inner theosophy, that of the soul. But followed with a selfish aim, theosophy changes its nature and becomes demonosophy. This is why Oriental wisdom teaches us that the Hindu yogi who isolates himself in an impenetrable forest, like the Christian hermit who retires to the desert, are both of them but accomplished egoists. The one acts with the sole idea of finding in nirvana refuge against reincarnation, the Hindu, and the other, the Christian hermit, acts with the unique idea of saving his soul. So you see how she's saying there is a transcendental theosophy, an inner theosophy, the theosophy of the soul, which is the true theosophy. And that implies a direct perception of truth, not just studying books. Studying books is part of the way in which we can train ourselves to be able to perceive the true theosophy, the divine wisdom. But this has to be done in a particular context, in the context of the service of humanity and of all sentient beings. If we pursue this, to be able to perceive the truth just in order to save ourselves, to gain individual enlightenment, to save our souls, whatever it is that we think of it, then she says that is not real theosophy, that is demonosophy, using this kind of change of words to express the fact that followed selfishly, you are not going to end up with divine wisdom. And we will see why this is the case. This is not just something that she's saying or some kind of divine command. So she continues with this idea that the selfish approach is not one that leads to real theosophy. She says there are some for whom their little personality constitutes the whole universe, beyond which there is no salvation. It is not such as these that can ever give a correct idea of practical theosophy, still less of the transcendental theosophy, which occupies the minds of a small group of the elect. So she was saying there are very few members in the society at the time that are really interested in this transcendental aspect of theosophy, that are trying to apply theosophical teachings so that they can develop the ability to perceive the transcendental theosophy. But they are doing this not for selfish reasons, but to help humanity. So she continues, in theosophy, what is required is emulation and not rivalry. In true theosophy, it is the least who becomes the greatest. So you see in all these quotes, by the way, taking them from the article, The Beacon of the Unknown, that you can find online. So in all these quotes, she's saying the true theosophist is one that lives by altruism, that is interested in the service of men, that is not working for self. He is the least, and because of that, he becomes the greatest. And as I was saying, is the reason is because these are the conditions to be able to perceive divine truth. And why is this the case? She says spiritual perfection and spiritual knowledge can only be reached on the spiritual plane. In other words, only in that state in which all sense of separateness, all selfishness, all feeling of personal interest and desire has been merged in the wider consciousness of the unity of mankind. So this truth is not available to anybody as long as that person is identified with his or her own personality. The spiritual truth, spiritual knowledge, as she calls it here, can only be reached when we enter a spiritual state of consciousness. And that spiritual state of consciousness is one in which there is no sense of separateness any longer. There is no selfishness. There is no feeling of personal interest and desire. So this is why she's emphasizing one can study theosophical teachings or any teachings with a selfish motivation. And you can become an expert in theosophical teachings and yet be selfish and doing this for your own gain. But nobody can perceive the transcendental aspect of theosophy by those means, because divine theosophy, transcendental theosophy exists when our personal identity is gone, when we are merged in our spiritual unity. So the faculty that is needed to perceive the transcendental truth is what she called spiritual intuition, or in a technical term, we call it buddhi. She talks about this faculty. She says, every one of us possesses the faculty, the interior sense known as intuition. But how rare are those who know how to develop it? You see here, first she says we do have this kind of spiritual perception latent in our nature, but we need to develop it, and most people don't know how to develop this. She continues, it is, however, the only faculty by means of which men and things are seen in their true colors. It is an instinct of the soul. It doesn't belong to the personality. It belongs to the soul, this kind of perception, which grows in us in proportion to the use we make of it, and which helps us to perceive and understand real and absolute facts with far more certainty than can the simple use of our senses and reason. So if we are going to perceive this more transcendental aspect of theosophy, we need to awaken this instinct of the soul, as she calls it, this faculty of spiritual intuition. It is only through this faculty that we can perceive and understand the reality behind everything that the senses may present to us. It is not by the use of the senses and the reason that we can see beyond the appearances to how things are in reality. So she continues, the infinite cannot be known to our reason, which can only distinguish and define, but we can always conceive the abstract idea thereof, thanks to that faculty higher than our reason, intuition, or the spiritual instinct of which I have spoken. So we see here again that which is infinite, eternal, etc., is beyond the range of thought. And that in order to perceive these things directly, not just read about them in a book, we need to develop this faculty of spiritual intuition. Now, this faculty of spiritual intuition can be awakened in spiritual states of consciousness. She says the great initiates who have the rare power of throwing themselves into the state of samadhi, a state in which one ceases to be the conditioned personal I and becomes one with the all. Those great initiates are the only ones who can boast of having been in contact with the infinite. So you see, this is again, the same kind of path that she was talking about when referring to the transcendental theosophy. The state in which we can reach the divine wisdom is one in which one ceases to be the conditioned and personal I and becomes one with the all. So this is our aspiration. If we are members of the society who aspire to become theosophists, true theosophists, whether in this lifetime or in a future lifetime, this is a long journey. But if we are that kind of member, then we are concerned with service, with altruism, with learning how to raise our consciousness beyond the personal states, with learning how to let go of the self, of the lower self, etc. This, along with the study, so here we see the study of the teachings help us direct our minds towards those truths, or our consciousness towards those truths. But then our practice in purifying the lower self, in living a life of altruism and service, will allow us in meditation to touch those more transcendental aspects of theosophy. And she says, these few characteristics of true theosophy and its practice have been sketched for the small numbers of our readers who are gifted with the desired intuition. So again, here she is characterizing this transcendental theosophy as the true theosophy. And she understands that a relatively small number of people will be interested in embarking on this particular journey. And even in our own cases, at the beginning, we may still be busy working with concepts, working with trying to understand all of this. But eventually, again, if we want to at some point become true theosophists in order that we can help humanity, eventually we need to start giving more room in our theosophical studies and practice to this more transcendental aspect of theosophy. So I hope that remembering HPB, remembering her life of service and her life of trying to guide us in this path can inspire in us, rekindle in us the enthusiasm to continue her work and to make an effort to become true theosophists in order to help humanity. Thank you.